Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Therapy in the Great Outdoors. Today, we are going to talk all about behavior. This is a very common question that I get that we talk about on our mentoring calls that we do in the TGO course, which is my nature-based therapy course, as well as in our discussions in the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community. So it can be really challenging managing children's big emotions when we are outdoors in a wild nature setting. So Jillian Blount is here today. She was a special education teacher. She has loads of training in supporting children with challenging behaviors and social emotional needs. And she is going to talk with us all about what she's learned over the years and strategies that have worked for her. So in just a minute, we will get into that interview. I'm trying to, at the beginning of every episode, give you all a little update on whatever's been going on in my work and in my businesses. So I am recording this late in the afternoon on the 4th of July, which seems really weird because I told myself I wasn't going to work today, but today has been the best lazy day at home day ever. If you don't know me, I have two older children that are away at college and don't live at home anymore. And my youngest is 12 and he is away at sleepaway camp. I'm very self-conscious of my voice right now. I have had a cold for about 10 days now, so forgive me if my voice sounds scratchy or very low and weird on this podcast. Listen to the other ones. My voice will be normal on those. So anyway, my son Ray, my youngest, has been away at sleepaway camp. So it's just my husband and I here and our puppy, who, I don't know, when do you stop calling a puppy a puppy? He's almost 8. I was going to say 7, but I think he's almost 8 months old. In a few days, he'll be 8 months old. So when do I stop calling him a puppy? I don't know. He's still puppy-like in our house. So I will keep calling him a puppy. So we've just been home with the puppy and like taking him on walks and playing with him and just hanging out. It's just been a nice time, kind of like a staycation almost. We've eaten out a lot by ourselves. And so anyway, I guess we've been empty nesters for about a week now. We pick our son up on Friday. So we're going to go up north in Wisconsin where I live and spend the night in a cabin and then pick our son up from sleepaway camp on Friday. So it's been kind of a chill week, but I have been so sick the last week that I have not done much work. I have forced myself to rest. And this is really what I wanted to share with you all in this little intro is that I do think there's a time for hustling in your business. Those of you who know me know that I'm really good at hustling and I get a lot done in a normal amount of time, but I do a lot. I have a lot of things going on in my career. I'm running 2 businesses, just started a 3rd business, and I have a lot going on. So I do think though that there are times and seasons when even if you love your work and you love to hustle and have a lot of things going on, maybe like I do, there are times when your body or the things going on in your life are telling you to rest. And that's kind of what this summer has been for me and is going to be for me for the next few months. So I finished my PhD in May and graduated, and now I've lost all momentum and have not done any writing at all to try to get my study from my dissertation published because I just have really been struggling with ambivalence and lack of motivation with writing. So I'm hoping in July to kind of slowly get into that again and make some edits to my draft and get it into my committee to then be able to submit to a journal to publish, the hard work I did for 5 years. And I'm trying to not prioritize things in work right now, and I'm trying to prioritize rest. So it's really important this summer that I don't work at a hustling or frenetic pace for me. That is my goal this summer. It's actually the goal I established when I was in my business Hive, the business coaching program that I run. And we all kind of on one of the last calls that we did a few weeks ago, we set some goals for like the next 2 months. Essentially, the program ends at the end of July. And so we kind of set goals to achieve by the end of the program. And mine was to rest. Like that was ultimately my goal. And so my goal to achieve by the next call was to book a camping trip, which I did. And I'm very excited about. So, but I think this is just a reminder to you all that there are seasons when you're running a nature-based business and when you're doing nature-based practice, and to just honor that the same way that nature has seasons and we have seasons in our lives too, and that it's okay to not be working at a really fast pace. Sometimes you have to. I'll be real. Like sometimes you have to just get stuff done in your business and get it done so that you can actually provide good services and have a thriving nature-based practice. That's like what I do in my work. I love to help therapists do that, to have these thriving businesses, right? But ultimately, after the hustle of startup and getting all the things in place that you need, I hope that you all are taking time for rest when you need it. So I've talked this topic to death now, but I'm just saying that I'm maybe not as goal-oriented as I used to be in my businesses, but also that could be because I've established my businesses for the most part. The nonprofit is still a long way, a lot of work to do, but I'm just kind of chipping away. I think that's a good strategy. And when you're overwhelmed in your businesses and you're tired, I think the best thing to do is just do the very next thing, whatever is very next in front of you, and take some time for rest. So that's what I'm doing this summer. It's been a great summer here in Madison. I live in Madison, Wisconsin. My practice is in California. That is my practice is still going in California. And we're getting started here in the fall. So I'm doing a little work on that as well. We'll be starting in September, some services here in Madison. So, okay, so that's kind of the update on my life. I'm trying to rest and also doing the next thing in all the businesses. So what else? What else do I need to tell you guys? I don't think there's anything else. Oh, wait, one more thing. Yes, that was on my list. We are opening, I mentioned the Business Hive. We are opening the Business Hive, which is my year-long group coaching program for nature-based business owners. Primarily, the people in this program are nature-based pediatric therapists of any kind. So they're generally starting and running nature-based practices for children. However, we do have some people running nature-based businesses in general in the Hive, and they have benefited from the program as well. So at this point in time, we open registration only at the end of July, and I am reserving 20 spots per year for this program. So I'm keeping it small in order to really support people inside of the program. I just pulled it up on my computer. We currently have 53 people on a wait list for this program. And if we enroll to 20 people in July, we will not open enrollment again until next July in 2024. I had originally, when I launched this program, this year-long program, I'd originally intended that we would kind of have overlapping cohorts, sort of was how I imagined it, with like people enrolling in July and then people coming in January again, and kind of overlap cohorts as we went, and everybody's in for a year. So we'd have people ending in July and people ending in January. And the way it worked out, we had only one person joined in January. And I think some of that was due to the way I launched and the way I didn't do I was very exhausted in January. I was about to finish my PhD and I was exhausted. And so I didn't do a very good job, I think, kind of getting the word out to people. But we had 12 people that had joined the July before. So we have 13 people in the program right now. All of them said that I should keep it a year. So I did, because they have really enjoyed it being together for that year. But I still wanted to keep it small. So what we're doing now is limited enrollment to 20 per year. So if we enroll to 20 from this wait list of 53 people now, then we are going to not open for enrollment again until July. I'm fairly confident that out of 53 people, we will have 20 people enroll. So if you're interested in that, please get on the wait list. You can go to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com and click on coaching, and you'll see all the information about the Hive, and you can join the wait list on that page there. I will be primarily sending emails to the people on that wait list when we open for enrollment, but I'll be doing a little bit on social media as well and to my general email list, just so everybody gets the word. All right, that's it for the intro, friends. Let's dive into our episode with Jillian Blount. She is the owner of WildFree Kids OT in Wasilla, Alaska. Yep, Alaska. You can do nature-based therapy in the cold. All right, let's dive into our conversation. Okay, welcome everyone back to another episode of Therapy in the Great Outdoors. I'm very excited that Jillian Blount is here. She's an occupational therapist and the owner of WildFree Kids OT in Wasilla, Alaska. Yes, she's in Alaska, where there's a lot of winter. You can do nature-based therapy and community-based therapy in winter. And Jillian is here for an actual special kind of episode of the podcast where we're going to delve into all things behavior with children, because working outdoors in a natural environment, and Jillian will speak to community-based environments as well, like it can have a lot of unique challenges for managing the behaviors that may come up when we are giving children challenging things to do in therapy, or just behaviors that come up in general, because we all have emotional things that come up in life, right? So Jillian has a ton of training in this. She's going to talk to you about kind of her history before she became an OT, and hopefully share some really good takeaways that we all can apply right away in our work with children. So welcome, Jillian. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Laura. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your business to start. I kind of shared that you're community-based, nature-based. Tell us about your business, and then we'll delve into kind of your background and the topic for today.
Yeah, I am, like you said, up in Wasilla, Alaska, and I am nature-based, but also mobile and community-based. So I go to the homes of the children I deal with and help. I see the families a lot. A lot of this kind of involved into just helping the families with a lot, because as we'll get into later, behavior is managed, should be, by the adults. But I see a lot of kids at preschools and daycares in the area too. And the thing about being up in Alaska, I think that is kind of an exceptional challenge, is our winters. Now, it is possible to get outside. However, some people don't want to. They don't have the resources. And that kind of makes it an exceptional challenge, is getting outside in the winter. And sometimes you can do it, and sometimes it's just too cold.
Right.
So, yeah. And like you said, I was a special education teacher for a decade before becoming an OT. I found it when I was student teaching, ironically enough, and kind of went, ooh, what's that? That's pretty cool. I like that. And I realized as a special educator, I was working with speech therapists and physical therapists and the OTs to really create programs, a lot of these really specialized programs, because I was the person that would jump into these schools with no resources, very little preparation. And I was handed and given, and I feel like a lot of people can relate to this, was given a most impossible challenge. It wasn't impossible, but a lot of really severe kids who needed a lot of support. I mean, almost one-on-one all day, every day. And specialized classrooms. And so I really got to hone my skills in there. And I spent half of my career at residential treatment centers. And so that, again, was a place where you can't just jump in and be all happy freely, but you have to know all of these things and how to manage the environment and how to interpret those nonverbals from adults. And there's so many pieces to that.
We'll get into that. I do think the residential treatment centers are a huge part of your experience that I think kind of probably informs, my guess is, informs what you're doing today and the approach that you take to behaviors, right? Because I feel like sometimes it's even weird to say managing behaviors,
Right.
Like the phrasing that we use of it. So please, I just want to give a caveat before we delve into talking about this, that like, let's all honor as therapists that there are many different ways of talking about this, and that language does matter, but also it evolves so quickly. Sometimes it's hard to know the right language to use around things. So I don't know, is managing behavior still the way we want to think about it?
That's the thing, is it's so specific, and everything you say, unfortunately, everything we say could be, somebody could have a problem with it and someone's like, ooh, perfect. Right. So really it's the spectrum. And it's a hard thing to say. When I say that, it's probably my old views about it, is we can't tell them how to behave. And like the thing about behavior is they're communicating something. The person who's displaying a behavior, which is that what we see is they're telling us something, they're communicating something, whatever that is, that's what we have to help with. And so maybe when I say managing behavior, I'm thinking we have to look at their nonverbals and maybe the antecedents and what led up to everything, and trying to synthesize everything and put it together and say, what really is going on here? And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes it could be something from yesterday that I had no idea that was an issue yesterday. And the kid's trying to do the same thing they did yesterday, but it wasn't allowed, or it was not safe, or whatever the reason. And so a lot of it is sometimes you have no idea why. And I'm speaking a lot of nonverbal or people who are non-speaking. Maybe they're autistic, for example. And so that's kind of a difficult thing sometimes, because we have to assume competence. We're all human. And honestly, my own child, for example, when he comes home, school's over for them this year, but when he would come home and be completely off from what is his typical behavior, I knew something was wrong. Would he tell me? Maybe not. Did I have to gauge the situation and give him some space and all of that? And I'm not perfect, and I'm not saying I have, every single right answer, but if you're not there and you have no idea what happened or what's going on, you have to do the best you can in that moment and figure out what's going on. So,
and thinking about that behavior, I think that's important for us to keep in mind. So this is getting into some of those tools and like the concepts that I want us to be wrestling with in this episode, really, of the podcast, is the idea that you just shared of remembering that all behavior, quote unquote, is communication. And trying to kind of get beneath the surface, which I think most pediatric therapists are pretty good at trying to like kind of see what all might be going on with a child and why would these behaviors that we're seeing be happening. I guess let's talk about some of the challenging behaviors that come up, and then let's get into like your approach to them, because I know we have an approach we use in my practice, and I'm wondering if like it's similar to what you would use. It's interesting to have these discussions and kind of know what people are using, right? So tell me some of the challenging behaviors that we might see. Like, let's talk about, what are we talking about here when we're working with kids? What are those challenging behaviors we might see?
And for some reason that professionals, healthcare people up here in this area, I live in the Matanuska, Sioux City borough, and for some reason it kind of has a higher elevation of a lot of things that affect childhood. So abuse, neglect, all the alcoholism. And so it's kind of this really interesting, they're trying to figure out why the rate is so much higher here. And that kind of plays into when kids come. Alaska's huge. I have a lot of kids who are in foster care on my schedule. I have a lot of kids who have been adopted. I have some Native Alaskans on my schedule. And so I kind of see everything. And so the trauma with a lot of these children is acute. The adults were the ones who caused the trauma. They were the ones, with the abandonment or neglect. I mean, the stories that I've heard up here, they're very similar to the stories that I've heard when I was a teacher at residential treatment centers, of neglect and 3-year-olds having to, steal food out of their cabinets to be able to feed themselves and their siblings, for example. And so it's a huge task. And a lot of it is those kids are just trying to be safe. They're trying to figure out who they can trust. And so that's a huge piece of it, is trying to figure out, how do I not just tell this kid you're safe and, oh, magic, it happens, but how do they really feel safe? How do these kids feel in control? But yet I am the one directing the things and helping. And I was telling you before, I see a kiddo with some pretty acute trauma, and we were just outside in their yard and kept trying to go in. And I think that's kind of a check-in with the caregiver. So when I say caregiver, I could mean foster parent, I could mean mom or dad or whoever's taking care of this child. It could be grandma, aunt, uncle. So checking in with the caregiver. And I had to kind of check myself and go, I'm the one who's with this child, but they must be needing something. So at one point I had said, hey, you're with me. What's going on? I thought we were out here together. What's happening? And so I actually followed this child in one of the times where they kept checking in with caregiver. And I let them know. I said, hey, we're just having like a tiny, because the kid had to go to the bathroom or wanted to ask about if they could use special markers or something like that. And so I followed them. I said, hey, I'm just going to check in and talk to your caregiver quick. And so it's like, hey, I know we've been in here 3 times. Like, did something happen today? Making sure that there's that open communication, because I could have said, no, you can't go back in the house. And then I'm like stopping that access to that safe person for whatever reason. And then I could have seen some behavior. So just by checking in, we didn't go back in the house afterwards. I didn't say we're not going back in the house. We just didn't need to go back in. And I think that was a big piece of this child was just like, usually there's more people outside. So that was what was different. Usually the family is outside playing and we're kind of separate, but this time everybody was in the house and there were no other neighborhood kids playing. So I think this child had like FOMO, like,
like, I need to go back in where everybody else is.
I know. And I was like, wait a minute. Oh, I got it. It's usually opposite. So just checking in with the adult, making sure that everything was okay. And then I have some kids, they run on a motor and they don't stop. We know those kids who they get hurt, they get a paper cut and they're, on the floor sobbing, but yet they fall down the stairs and they bounce right back up. Those kids like, whoa. And parents, caregivers, they are at a loss of what to do. And then when they're outside and they have kind of more freedom and they're playing, I have seen injuries and I've seen fighting like I've never seen before between siblings, because they're playing with whatever we're playing with, or we're on the trampoline and they're just crashing into each other. Yeah. And so a lot of it is we need a time. I'm going to notice what's happening. Whoa, you guys really crashed. That looked like it hurt. And instead of addressing I'm going to say aggressor as like the person who was on as a motor, just crashing into everybody on purpose, that person seeking that out. You're just the one that got hurt. And you say, whoa, you guys crashed. You okay, man? Are you okay, little one? Yeah. And you address them and you allow this other kid to kind of take a moment and go, oh, we did crash. Because they're so used to people telling them, you just hurt your sibling. You just hurt her. Yeah. You just crashed into them. Blah, blah. And they're so used to that it's almost as if they are blinded to it. It's almost like the input goes in and out. And they're like, oh, I just have to sit here and pretend like I'm listening. And then we can get back to normal. And so by addressing the one who got hurt first, and saying, excuse, whoa, man, come in. Do you need a hug? What do you need right now? And allowing that other kid to say, oh, I did really hurt that, my sibling, and giving them that noticing time.
Yeah, because even if the other child, and this is a strategy, when I ran really large group camps many years ago, this was a strategy that I remember as top of mind, was like when those conflicts occur and someone is the one who is doing the hurt, and it's very clear you watched it happen, right? But you just couldn't get over there in time or whatever, to really focus the attention on the child who was hurt versus on the child who was doing the hurting, because you can circle back to them right later to kind of problem solve the situation. But okay, so the strategy it sounds like very similar to what you do. So the strategy we use at Outdoor Kids OT and that we teach like our employees to use is like based on Diane Kulinane's book. It's called, I'm going to forget the name of it, and it's not on my bookshelf because it's in California at my practice for my therapist to use. I think it's called Behavioral Challenges in Children with Special Needs or something. But basically, it's a relationship-based approach to behavior, very similar to DIR, like developmental individual differences, relationship-based Greenspan's work, which I think informed Ross Greene's work, who many people know about as well. He wrote The Explosive Child. So there's a lot of resources out there for managing behavior. So the way I frame it in our practice is connect, calm, reflect. And I know people have issue with the word calm. I'll just say that straight out because we don't want to make kids calm all the time. I understand that, but also I do think the word calm is a very simple way to remember. We need to like de-escalate the situation, right? So it's like connect is like honor their emotions, like what you just said, name what happened without judgment. Calm is like focus on self-regulation, like getting the child to a space where their thinking brain comes back online, because you cannot reflect and problem solve until that thinking brain comes back online. And somehow that like
the fact that it rhymes like reminds me in my brain to connect, calm, reflect. Like it's easy for me to remember. I don't know if it's the same as what Ross Greene says, but his whole thing is like collaborative problem solving approach. But essentially that like last step of reflect is problem solving. It's like problem solving with the child to help them kind of come up with a solution to whatever was the trigger in the situation earlier on when they were unable to kind of have their thinking brain online. So I'm wondering, like, do you use something like that? Does that sound similar to what you do? Or are there other things you'd add to that or take away? I don't know.
Yeah, it's very similar. And a lot of that noticing and validating is a huge piece. And there's no judgment there. I'm not telling you you're being good or bad. I'm not even using those words. I'm just validating you and seeing what I notice. And I model a lot for parents that aspect of, keeping that, collect your nonverbals real quick, make sure that that child can tell that you're calm and that you're regulated, because sometimes these things can get pretty extreme and you have to be the one. And sometimes it's so hard.
Oh yeah. Anyone who has kids knows that that's hard. I mean, I am ashamed of some of my behavior when my oldest kids were young. I was very young when I had kids. I think I had my first at like 25. There was not, 20 years ago, y'all, there was not this whole co-regulation. Nope. It was just like nobody knew this stuff, or like maybe like really attuned parents did and I wasn't one. I don't know, but like I do have a lot. I'm embarrassed and it's like shameful. Like I remember distinctly, I'll share it here because I want people to feel like you're normal if you've lost it before. Like I remember my oldest two are 17 months apart. So they are very close in age. And I had like probably like a 9-month-old infant, a 2.5-year-old, I guess that would be. I'm not doing the math right now, but clearly wasn't doing the math either when the second one was conceived. But anyway, but they were really close in age. And I remember my second was maybe like close to a year old. The older one was 2.5, something like that. And they were both screaming, crying, like whatever it was. I don't remember. They were both just like super crabby. And I just like screamed at the top of my lungs, like just in my house was just like, because I just was losing it. And they both like stopped for like a second and their eyes got really wide and looked at me and it was like dead silent. And then it was like, they both just started screaming even louder. And it's like a good story about, I might actually write that in my book because I may as well. I just shared it publicly. So because I do think like I do think it's a true story. And I do think any parent can relate to like losing it. There's nobody on earth who has not lost it. Right. But it shows like in a short little snippet of time how your child reads your behavior and responds however you are as an adult. And I just wish I would have had when I was younger. And I think sometimes as therapists, we can shy away from, at least I do. I know sometimes it's hard for me. And maybe you can speak to this, Jillian. Like sometimes it's hard for me to hold parents to that standard because I know how hard it is. It's hard for me to challenge parents to be self-regulated and maintain control because I know how hard it was for me as a young parent. Now I'm way better now. I mean, I've gotten way better with time, probably too late for my 20-year-old, my 19-year-old, but anyway. But the youngest child always gets the best parent, I think. It's hard, I think, sometimes to tell parents that they need to be the ones to control themselves if they want their child to be controlled. Because you feel, I don't know, I feel kind of like bad telling people they need to change their own behavior. Like, how do you get around that? I'm interested to hear you. Yeah. Because I know you use a lot of parent coaching and you talk to parents a lot about these topics. So yes, tell us about that.
So I have stories like that too. The same thing where you're just like, and my parents were both cycle breakers. They had agreed before they had children because they were in a lot of those cycles of abuse. I'll just say it. And they had to decide who would be the one who would discipline and who would be the one to not, because they didn't know. And so these things bring out so much. Yeah. And people, when you're in that moment, and our brains are so wired sometimes, and it takes a lot of practice. And I mean, I remember times as a child where, as you learn later and you go, oh, that's why, that makes sense. Or, oh, I got that now. Yeah. And you can't appreciate it when you're a child. You have no idea, the things that I said and did as a kid, like we're kids. And
right.
We're dealing with kids too. And so that's why it's really hard. But at the same time, we have to assume competence. We have to, give them information as much as we feel they need. Yeah. But that's a hard thing, is trying to find that balance. And I tell parents, it's like, I get it. I've been there. And that's why stories of my own children. I mean, I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old, and that's all the noise that can come out of my mouth is sometimes, and they're very different, but they're very similar. And even my husband and I have to look at him and go, hold on a second. Like, that's not what's going on here. Or can we talk before we make a decision? Because sometimes we want to make those snap decisions. But there's a story. I had a kiddo that I was working with. The kid was facing me, mom was behind kiddo, and kiddo started singing a song. I want
you to share this. I was just about to say, share the story that you shared inside of the Hive community. Because Jillian's in the business Hive, my business coaching program, and has been for the last almost year now. You're coming to the end of your year. And she shared this story inside of our community. And I'm so glad that you're bringing it up, because I want to hear you tell it in the verbal version, not the typed version, because it's so funny. It's classic, knowing how to manage your own emotions. So go, Jillian, share it.
And I will preface this with, I've had a lot of practice. When you work with kids who want to watch every single reaction you have, and they go, ooh, and they pick up on that, these kids are smart. They can be calculated. Some of them can be manipulative. And at treatment centers, we weren't really allowed, and it was discouraged to share personal information, because that could be used against us. And being threatened, for example, or my kids being threatened, has a different impact on you. And that's what sometimes these kids want. When you're changing behavior, there's that extinction burst where things get worse before it gets better, that whole thing. And so we had to control our nonverbals. We couldn't share information for a lot of reasons. And so I've had a lot of practice. And I also been told I have really good RBF. So maybe it's good practice.
Tell people what RBF is, just in case.
That resting bitch face. You always look like you're mad. I'm not.
Deadpan.
Deadpan. And so I had this kiddo who I think was trying to spice things up a little bit in the session, and started singing a song, and was giving me that look, that look where they're kind of like, oh, what are you going to do? And it started singing, dick, 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 dick. And I was like, deadpan. I could see mom behind this kid, totally mortified, trying not to laugh, because it was hilarious. It was really hilarious.
Right.
And I could just see mom just going, I don't know what to do, because this is hilarious, but also really embarrassing.
And also probably thinking, should I tell him to stop? Does Jillian want him to stop saying this word that is not appropriate in a session?
Right. And so I just real deadpan. I was like, oh, that's a new song I've never heard you sing before. What made you think of it? And it stopped. And he's like, I don't know. I just thought it would be funny. And I moved on. I didn't address it. I didn't say, don't sing that. I didn't say that's inappropriate. I didn't say nobody wants to talk about that. And I moved on, because that's what that was my strategy, was with this particular child. Every kid's different. With this particular child, if I would have said, you're not supposed to say that word, oh, that's an immediate sign. Ooh, that's a funny word. That's going to get a reaction. And if we've noticed, sometimes the words that kids use when they're mad, they get more of a focus than their actual feelings. And I mean, I have so many stories about letting kids verbally unload when they're at school, and not worry about what words they use, because they won't get in trouble with me, because it takes that piece away. It takes that, this is unattainable. I'm not supposed to use it. And so later I get a text message from mom, and she's like, nice work on not addressing that or ignoring it. And that was really funny. As soon as kiddo finds out what that word means, this is just never going to stop. And I just said, yeah, I've had a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I don't know what else to say. I've had a lot of practice. And I have a feeling that this kid is told sometimes, wherever they are, home, daycare, school, wherever they are, don't say that. That's not appropriate. And it sticks with them, because when we tell people don't do that or stop that, they want to do it more, because that's top of mind. And so that is, I mean, I've done it. That was just one example of being able to kind of address that without having to address it, without having to say, don't say that, because then they're like, ooh, I know that's a word I'm not supposed to say. Let me do it more and more.
I think the direct quote that I remember from when you shared the story inside of our like our forum where we have our discussion was that Mom wrote, "Thanks for holding it together today during the Dick song."
Yes, that's right.
So funny, like that the mom wrote that, you know, like, like if he ever finds out, like we will never hear the end of the song. Like, so it just like kind of took care of it. So I guess like let's think about some more specifics. Like I want to talk some more about like these really challenging, because you know, there's every practice, every nature-based practice, every clinic-based practice. I mean, really, this episode could be for any therapist in general, has some children who have very challenging behaviors. Like we have a couple of kids in the course of my practice that we've had to literally carefully form the entire group around the one child, right? Because they're ready for a group model, but we really have to be careful about the combo of the kids that we put together in that group, right? And some of the behaviors that I know of that are very challenging, one in particular, running away in the wild nature environment. That's like a real risk, right? Or a hazard, I should say. It's not risky, it's hazardous. And other ones that come up are like hitting or throwing things, or language, language when you're in a group. Like when you're in a one-on-one session with a child, you can ignore it. The parent can ignore it. You can kind of control the environment a little more. Group settings become a little bit more, I think the behavior challenges become more prominent because there's so many other variables. You can set off other kids, right? And then it kind of becomes more difficult to manage, I think, in a group setting. So I don't know, have you done outdoor groups yet? I can't remember if you have. Like, I don't know if you have thoughts on managing groups. Clearly you've managed groups because you've been a teacher. But
true. I'm working on that piece. I'm transitioning to that. I'm still waiting on that outdoor practice location, but I see groups of siblings together. And so that has been helpful. But the issue with siblings is they're so used to each other already that sometimes I'm coming in and trying to break those patterns or maladaptive behaviors and trying to help the parents figure out how to help manage that and how to validate and address the things that really need to be addressed and how to ignore some of it. And so I do have the privilege. I have several sibling groups that I get to work with outside, and I'm seeing all of them for OT, for example. And so I think what maybe makes me a little bit different and my brain a little bit different is it's not so much, I'll go back to when I was in undergrad as a special ed teacher, learning about emotional behavioral disabilities. This is dating me. We were learning about externalizing and internalizing behaviors. So those kids who are violent, aggressive, they might be the ones who are really loud, and there's no, they wear their heart on their sleeve. And then we have those kids who are more internalizing, who are more depressive and they're quiet and they kind of go in on themselves. And I remember in school, them telling us you're never supposed to put those two groups together because they will feed off of each other.
Interesting.
In a classroom. Yeah. It's never not happened. You always have, because there's never, I subbed in districts while I was an OT. You always have those groups together. They're always together.
Yeah.
So
it's like saying you can only hang out with people who deal with life the same way as you. Like that's just not reality in life.
Right.
Like,
in an ideal world, we would separate the people with those externalizing behaviors and internalizing, because those kids or people with internalizing personalities, they tend to soak in all that stuff. They're often easy targets. And so I see.
I hear you.
They're easy targets. And I can see it. Sometimes they hide and they look like they're doing well, but they're not, because they're so used to masking and they're so used to hiding and they're so used to being not ignored or pushed to the side. But just like, if they're not losing it, people don't attend to that. Yeah. And so you have those kids who are losing it all the time, who are getting a lot of the attention because it's so in your face. And we have to remember to address those other kiddos, those other people who are more quiet And a lot of it is those roles. Like we put people in roles that sometimes they don't want to be in. We have those expected roles of, hey, you're the quiet one. You're the nice one. You're the one who helps out whenever I need to. And maybe they don't want to be, or maybe they've been forced in that. And so that's another piece, is trying to break those roles down and show parents when, and I know when I'm dealing with this, when I hear, oh, she's the quiet one, or she's really quiet, or he likes to play by himself. He doesn't have a lot of friends. So you can kind of pick up when people use those words.
Yeah.
So when I'm dealing with a family, that gives a lot of background, but I think because of my residential treatment experience, and when I say manage the environment, that's because I needed to manage my own body and facial expressions, tone of voice, everything. But then I also needed to look at other adults and be able to, the pair I had in my classroom at one of my schools was top notch. We were like the dental hygienist and the dentist. We could look at each other,
right.
You're like, how do you, when you're there and you're like, how do they know what they need? How do they know? They just click and it's amazing. Yep. And that's what makes a lot of those environments really great. Even you can have that in a family setting. You can have that in whatever setting, is when the adults can look and what they mean, what they're talking about, and they can have difficult conversations too. And so that's where I'm coming from, is I see the kids who they're looking like they're helpful, but really they're trying to control the environment. They're trying to make sure that they know how everything is going to go. For example, a chair. I have a kiddo that I see at a local preschool, and there's this chair. This kid will not give up. And I love this kid. And I'm talking with daycare and I'm talking with mom, and we're trying to figure things out. And it's more of a preschool setting. And the chair is such an issue all day. And I was like, I'm trying to figure out. And I'm like, honestly, it's a chair. Tell me, like, what is the issue with this chair? Because I'm kind of like if that's what we need to use, if this kid needs to know this chair belongs to them all day, no one's going to sit in it. No one's going to take it. It's not going to disappear. If that kid needs that, I'm trying to learn what's the problem. I don't understand. Tell me what the problem is.
Like, why can they not just have the chair all day?
Right.
Like it's an accommodation and who cares, right?
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Kind of. Yes.
Okay.
Because I'm just trying to learn. I'm not trying to tell them how to run their room. I'm not trying to tell the adults, oh, I'm the expert, because I'm in this instance, I might not be, but I'm just trying to get another, and I can add more insight. Because I had walked in, it was breakfast time. This kid would not get up out of the chair to go wash hands. And then when I joined this child at the spot, they said, oh, don't let anybody sit in my chair. I'm like, oh, it's the chair. And I said, okay, I'm right here. I didn't say, I promise. I didn't say nobody will sit in the chair.
Right.
I just said, I'm here. You're good. Wash your hands. And then the kid wanted sanitizer instead of hand washing. And the staff said, nope, you have to wash your hands. Well, that set off another thing. Kid kept looking at the chair. And I said, I'm here. You can wash your hands. I was so worried about the chair that someone else was going to sit in this chair. And then afterwards, I was able to communicate. Like, the kid came back. I said, you need to wash hands before. It's just, that's what is right now in the schedule. So I went back to, this is what the schedule says. It's not hand sanitizer. It's washing your hands, because you need to wash. You guys just played in the dirt. You guys just planted stuff. You've got to wash that dirt away. It's different. And I said, the schedule says you have to wash your hands. Not I said, or your teacher said, or this adult said. It's the schedule says you have to wash your hands. And I didn't, I just left it at that. And so kid washed hands, came back. And then later I could talk to the adults and say, what was that all about? Like, what happened? And try to communicate and collaborate with the adults on this issue of the chair.
Yeah.
And then I said, I think this kid's just trying to control the environment, because this chair is their
safe place.
Of controlling it. And I guess, like, another kid wants a chair and they've had to rotate, and it shouldn't be that we have to revolve a whole room around a chair for a child to feel safe, but that's what we need to do right now. And I told them that. I said, if this is what the kid needs for a while.
Right. It's like, because to me, that's not like not like a dangerous thing. Like, for me, the concern when we're out in nature with kids and a kid is running away constantly, Like that's one of the rules. Like in our groups, we have like very clear behavior policies before a kid comes into group that they need to be able to do XYZ behaviors in order to participate in the group, because it's not safe unless you have one-to-one, which we don't have the staffing ability to have. So I don't know, maybe we could talk about this. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. Like, I personally feel like there are kids who are not ready for a group model of therapy, and that is okay. It just means not yet, right? It just means they're not quite ready yet. They might be at some point in the future, but they need to be seen in an individual basis before they're ready for that group. And it's only happened, I'd say it's probably happened a handful of times, like 5 times maybe in the course of, I think we're entering year 8 of my practice. I lost track after like 5. I was like, I don't know what year we're in. But in all those years of running groups, there have been a handful of kids that we've had to ask to leave the group for safety reasons. And it really is a matter of thinking about the complexity of a group environment with 4 other kids' behaviors all contributing to kind of the one child being triggered for whatever reason, variety of reasons, right? It can be personality differences between kids or whatever. Maybe it's internal, externalizing, like maybe there's a lot of different factors contributing to it. But like the safety, I think sometimes therapists can feel a sense of failure if they can't make a group. Yeah, I'm specifically thinking of groups because I know a lot of people run like camps and things like that outdoors. And I hope that people can be encouraged that like, not every setting can be right for every child. And there is this like clinical reasoning we have to do about like what is appropriate for this child. And if they're not quite ready for a group, then use it as like a not yet kind of thing, right? Like talk with the families. It's not a no, it's just a not yet. And I think Angela Rosenberg said that to me, and it really stuck with me during one of our conversations a while back. And I feel like I like that language of not yet, of just telling families like it's not a, this is a never thing that's never going to happen, or your kid's not ready, like it's just kind of saying not yet. Let's back up the train a little bit and like figure out what we need to do right now for them to be able to participate in the future. I'm going to pivot a little bit with this question, but I've heard you say some things like antecedent behavior consequence, like kind of some of the behavior language, right? Or we need to look at there was another word you used that was like reinforce the extinction burst, where like people, when we're trying to get a behavior to go away, we're going to see this burst in the behavior, right? So those terms, like we kind of talked about language at the beginning of the podcast, those terms are very like behavioral kind of terms, right? And I know specifically for the field of OT, I don't know if for physical and speech and mental health counselors, if it's the same, but I know sometimes there's a kind of a clash between how OTs would approach behavior, maybe pediatric therapists in general, because we're concerned about children's emotional health as well as their behavior. There's this clash between like behaviorism and a therapeutic or relationship-based approach to behavior. But I hear you using some of those behavior terms. So I want to hear you talk on that a little bit, because I know you're not like a behaviorist, like just look at the antecedent, make the behavior extinct. Like, I know that's not your approach, but talk a little bit about that. I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to really pinpoint what process, because I have so much and from everywhere. I mean, I have like 5 different de-escalation strategy trainings that I'm pulling in, and sometimes things work for certain people and sometimes they don't. I like to see the behavior because then I know what their limit is, what to do about it. Are they overwhelmed, overstimulated? And so when I use that extinction burst, because I tell parents, if you want this behavior to go away, if this is something that's unsafe, unsavory, it's something you're working on. Because I'll tell you right now, a lot of my families are walking on eggshells. These kids are the ones, when I say running the house, I don't mean that the world revolves around this one child, but I have been there with my own kid where I'm like, we're walking on eggshells, because if my son sees a banana, for example, the morning is like ruined. And I'm like, who's in charge here? Who's in charge here? I mean, I'm not lying. We used to have to hide bananas for my son, because when he was little, if he saw banana and we said, no, you can't have one right now, we had a tantrum.
Yeah.
And then I mean, they were not little tantrums or meltdown or whatever it was. And we were trying to figure that out too. Because he didn't communicate really. He didn't use verbal communication until he was 3. He screamed and he was just exited from speech. Like, it's been a long road.
Oh, that's great.
I know. So when I say like extinction burst, that's a way for me to tell parents, like, it's going to get worse before it gets better, because the child is used to a certain level of attention, a certain level of give. And we do things to not raise that. We do things to just keep it, like I said, walking on eggshells. We keep a lid on things. And I often tell families, the things that you are embarrassed or shameful, or you wouldn't share with other people because you know you're going to get, people are going to go, what? You do that so that your kid doesn't have a tantrum? Right. There's no judgment. I have no judgment. I get it 100%. I was there. And so when I use that extinction burst, I say, hey, if we want to change this or fix this or do anything about this behavior, because if you can't leave your house in the morning because your child's socks, example, aren't matching, or you can't leave your house because something happened last night and they're stuck on Legos or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's a problem. And that's for your whole family. It is interrupting everybody's day, everybody's flow. And so extinction burst is a way to explain that behavior is going to get worse before it gets better, because they're trying to challenge and say, wait a minute, this used to work.
Right.
And now I have to kind of up the ante. And I've had parents give up. I've had parents say,
oh, sure. We all have. At some point, it's like, as a parent, you just say, I'm not going to fight this battle. I think part of the art of parenting is like realizing what battles to fight and what battles you just need to let go. Right. It really is. And then you can focus on what really matters and what is really impacting the daily life of the family or whatever. But you're framing this like, yes, you're using extinction bursts, but I think I also hear in your approach that you are like focusing on the emotional health of the child. And I think that's what's missing in a behaviorist kind of mindset, is like a behaviorist would take that situation and be like, you're just going to tell the child, no, you're going to let them have the tantrum. And then in a couple of days, the tantrums are going to go on. And in a couple of days, they're going to put those damn socks on to get to school or whatever. You know, it's this very like kind of clinical, like Pavlov's dog kind of approach, you know, like just sort of do this and get this behavior. And I think there's so much more to like the training that you've had about de-escalation and what we know now that neuroscience says about relationship being the basis of behavior, right? That you're not using this approach that is just behaviorist in nature. But I think so often we as OTs kind of, there's so much out there now that is like co-regulation and you know, co-regulating with the child, like maintaining your own kind of regulated state so that the child will maintain their regulated state. And it's almost like we lose the behavior piece in some way. So I kind of think it's both and like, it's hard to kind of communicate that, because I feel like the behavior stuff gets like thrown out. It's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater or whatever they say, right? I don't know where we get these phrases that have come into be like modern life phrases that we use, but that's a weird one. But I do feel like, I don't know, there's something to be said for kind of honoring that history of behaviorism in some way, while knowing that we are also needing to honor that relationship and connection is key to behavior. And if you just take that behaviorist approach, you're not going to get a change in behavior that's true over the long term. Like it's not actually going to change the root cause of the behavior. So like, what are you doing? It sounds like you work with like a lot of kids with trauma, right? So I want to hear more about like the things you're doing as far as like the safety piece. Like, what are some strategies people can use to help kids feel safe that have maybe been through trauma, or maybe just kids who have these like kind of needs? Maybe they have real mental health challenges and they just have a need to control the situation, right? That may not come from trauma, but it's a true mental health diagnosis that they may have. Like, what are strategies to help kids feel safe? How do we build relationships with kids in our sessions with them?
Yeah. I remind parents to use schedules, to use some in conjunction with the child, to help the child develop a schedule. So you can always go back to the schedule says This is what time, not me, or I told you, or you chose this. It's, hey, the schedule says it's time to brush your teeth. Would you like some help with that? Or do you got this? And then addressing that need for the environmental safety. So some kids who have that trauma, they want to know where the exits are. Just for example, they want to know where the exits are, or they don't like their back towards things. So even just that kind of positioning can make a big difference. Your space between people can be a big thing, even your body language. And asking kids permission to get into their space is like number one on the list, on my list of safety. And I will tell them, if there's an issue that comes up and they're not being safe, I will tell them, I don't want to have to stop you with my body because I know you don't like that. And I'm trying to help you be safe, and you're having a hard time with that right now. And I will put my arm to block or put my body in between, whatever I need to do to keep them safe. And again, you can do that and then address if there's, multiple people, you put your back to the aggressor and you block them entirely, and you are looking at the victim, whoever's been, I say victim.
Well, it's a language thing. It's like, we know what you mean by that.
Yes.
We know. Yeah.
And so looking at them saying, oh my gosh, you just got something thrown at your face. Can I check it out? You okay? Do I have permission to look? I see you're not bleeding. How can we, do you need to go to the bathroom and check your face or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And then give a moment, another tick of saying, you address that person first, and then you address and say, well, what just happened there? We were playing a game and I noticed, again, using that, I noticed that you looked like you were super mad. How did you feel? And
that naming the emotion is key. Yeah.
And not,
so that
and
they
not,
know to.
Right. And not telling them you were mad, because I don't know. I noticed you looked mad, or you threw something.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so instead of telling them you were mad and giving them, putting them in those roles and naming their feelings. Again, some kids can figure this out. Some need a little bit more help.
Yeah.
But we tell them you were mad. And if they weren't mad, maybe they were sad, or maybe they were mad that it wasn't their turn, or whatever.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but that's really interesting to me, because I often name the emotion for the child, like just thinking that maybe they don't have the ability to do that. So you're saying maybe I should say, it looks like you were mad, or something like that, instead of you're mad. I mean, I guess because I'm always trying to limit language too. That's something else we talk about in the approach we use to behavior, is like, think movement rather than language. Like, you don't want to bombard a child with words when they are in a fight or flight state and their brain is going offline and they're totally like, I think I'm a very verbal person. I talk a lot. It's how I learn. I love talking. And so for me, it's really hard to get quiet. Again, it's that like regulating yourself, right? Like, get quiet and help the child to move or do something with their body, maybe, instead of chattering at them. So I think sometimes when a child's really upset and I say, you're mad, I see you're mad. When I say that, I'm trying to limit language. So yeah, I think it takes a lot of practice to know like kind of how to say that. But I like that. That'll stick with me, that little nugget of like, don't assume that you know
how they feel,
what a child is feeling.
Yep, right.
Because it could be much more nuanced than that. Yeah.
Could be. And a lot of the kids I deal with and that I work with, and the families that I deal with, like, I could say one thing and I'm totally wrong, because I'm not in that family. I don't know. And so that's what I tell parents too, is we don't know. We're not in their brain. We have no idea. They could be really sad about something, but they look mad because that's how they're presenting, because either that's what we've pegged them as, or that's how they've always expressed their emotions. And so by telling them, you look really mad right now, and I might take a deep breath and kind of model that, and just take a deep breath and give them another tick and saying, we were having really a lot of fun, and we were inventing a new game. That must have been confusing. Yeah. You looked really mad when you threw blah, 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 or she was really close to you, wasn't she? And maybe there's something that happened earlier. And so that's the big piece of it is we have no idea. So when I do say that antecedent behavior consequence, that whole behaviorist approach, we have to look at what happened before that we don't know. What is the behavior that's showing? And then what's going to happen afterwards? How do we deal with that afterwards? It doesn't necessarily have to be all behavioral, but we have to give these kiddos one extra tick of time to think about and give them some of their own awareness. And so I have a kiddo that motor is just driving this kiddo all the time. And we'll be doing something, and whatever we're having, whatever we're engaging with, ball, frisbee, whatever, clunk someone in the face. It was clearly an accident and it happens, but some people think it's not. Like sometimes it's like clunk right in mom's face and you're going, whoa, that hit mom right in the face. And instead of saying you hit mom in the face, I'll say, whoa, that frisbee got mom in the face. What are we going to do to fix this? Because I don't want to say sorry, because that's a whole.
Oh gosh, I hate when people tell kids to say sorry. It's like, that is not.
It's like
not helpful.
No, and like the sharing piece, like we could have podcasts about sharing and apologizing, because if you just say sorry and then move on with your day and don't actually have any awareness and don't actually say, hey, I didn't mean to hit you in the face with that frisbee. Next time I'll hit it over here. I'm really sorry. Do you forgive me? Like there's more than just I'm sorry and moving on.
Yeah. And that's where like the relationship based approach to behavior comes in, because it's like you're seeking for like true. I used to say to my kids, are you guys right with each other now? You know, like, can you make it right with each other? It's really the word repent is what I like. I like forgiveness and repentance as like words that indicate you've forgiven someone and you're repenting. You're like turning from, it's a turning from the behavior that hurts someone. Right. And so I think this idea of relationship-based approaches to behavior being like the goal is the reconnection of relationship. That's the goal ultimately in any kind of like conflict that arises between two people. And again, that can't really happen until the brain is back online after their body is a little more in a regulated state. And then that problem solving that happens, like I know ultimately we want that problem solving to repair the relationship to come from the child themselves, right? It's very different to have a for us to facilitate a conversation about like earlier today, remember when the frisbee hit so-and-so's face? Although I'm laughing at that example because I'm like, I would throw a frisbee and it would hit someone's face. I know you're just throwing out examples, but like maybe it's they hit a kid with a stick or something. Remember when you used the stick to hit John or whatever? I wonder if we could talk about what happened. You know, what do you think? What was the problem there? Like how can we fix that problem? You know, and like talk with them about the solutions to the problem and help them kind of direct their thinking towards making things right with John, right? Now, sometimes, and I was wanting to wrap us up, but this does bring up another topic. Sometimes kids do not have the language or cognitive problem solving ability to kind of do that collaboration of problem solving. I'm wondering if you have had that situation come up before, and like, how do you work with parents to kind of figure out what's going on when maybe the child doesn't have, just developmentally, they may not have the ability to kind of problem solve a situation like that?
Yeah. I use a lot of signing too. And I'll notice, say like on my own behavior. And so when I'm helping or when I have a kiddo who might be nonverbal or their communication is not with words, except for screaming, like my own child.
Sure, yeah, and that's communication. Yeah,
that is communication. It's just not the words we're used to, so it's harder for us to pinpoint what's going on. I might tell them like, "Oh man, someone just took this out of my. I hate when people take things out of my hands. I don't know what it is. It's like." And it happens all the time. And I'll kind of start with that. And so if I have a marker, let's say a marker, and we're doing something or we're outside and someone takes something out of my hands, I might say, oh, I was holding that. And I might have, a confused look on my face. And I'll kind of hold my hand out and they say, can you put it back in my hand, please? Because I was still using that. And trying to model, like, I'm not done with that. I'm not going to tell you, you don't have to apologize. I'm not expecting that, but I'll say, can I have that back, please? I was still using that. And it goes kind of back to, I've worked with other kids who they'll sign something or use a different way to communicate. Like, for example, I was a school-based OT for a while, and they'll say they have to go to the bathroom, they might sign it. Yep. And then one of my biggest pet peeves is, oh, use your iPad to tell me that. They just did. They just told you.
Oh, yeah. That
like they
looking
signed
for the communication is key.
And you're like, they just did. And so it kind of goes back to, if you want this, how might you ask? And I say, I can tell you're trying to grab that. Would you like this? And you have to really pick up on the nuances of that child's communication, because if they're, looking at you or making any sort of contact with your face, it doesn't have to be eye contact, or they're grabbing towards it, or even seeking that permission, you have to really pick up on the nuances of those kids, because some of them, their impulse is really slow, or really fast. So just being able to take an extra tick is huge, and we have to acknowledge that. And so I will often label how I feel or what I notice has happened and what I would like to happen, so that those children can see, we can do this a different way. Or when I ask, and then when I say please or sorry, or when I go like this and I look at you, that means I want that.
She's doing hand motions, everyone.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Because we're not going to have the video for people to be listening to or watching, but
I forget.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is giving communication for, hey, this is one other way we could do this, is you could ask me, or, when you're holding out your hand, you must want that. So I'll say, hey, did you want this marker? Oh, you must want this marker. Here you go. And just giving them another way to communicate. And parents also, because I know playing while we're triggered, for example, is really hard. And like every time someone takes something out of my hands, I'm like, oh, I don't know what it is, Laura.
Yeah.
But it's good practice for, hey, I was still using that. I wasn't done. Instead of, hey, give that back. Hey, I wasn't done. And then I will tell them, oh, we're not using scissors right. I need those right now. I need you to give those to me. But
so it's like noticing, you're saying like noticing their attempts to communicate.
Yes.
That might not be what we're cluing into, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
So looking for the nuances of a child's behavior that may be communicating to us what they want to communicate, but maybe don't have words or, kind of conventional ways of communicating.
Right. And I think it's hard when you're in it all day, every day, and you're in survival mode and it's stressful, and you're trying to figure out what your child, who might not use words to speak, wants or needs or feels. And it's really hard. And then for me to come in and say, oh, this, or this, it's another viewpoint. And I'm not trying to change people or tell them, what to do or how to do it. But hey, here's another way, or here's a different way, or have we thought about this, or do you think maybe it's this? Just giving like a little bit of more awareness.
Well, that brings up too. I know we have like a printable inside. It's one of the therapy resources inside of the Hive. A printable that's like at the top, it says I feel, and it has a bunch of different faces with the emotions. So the kids can identify, and this could be for kids that are younger even and do use language to communicate, but it could also be for children that don't use verbal communication. They can select one of the emotions at the top, and we built it based on like the 5 or 7, I can't remember what it is. There's like 5 core human emotions essentially that have been found in research, because we wanted it to be so simple, like not overwhelming, not like the whole page of emojis, like
I know that's
so it's like the 5, I think it's the 5 emotions, and then tired and hungry. Those are the things we have on there. Right. And then at the bottom, it just says I need, and there's like a blank space for them to either draw, or we can draw for them. Then we could say, do you need food, and draw a picture of food? Do you want to take a break and go on a walk? Do you want to go in the swing? And so there's a visual. I think visuals are also something really helpful to use with kids who may not have the ability, especially when they are feeling overwhelmed, even if they have gotten their body to a more calm and regulated state. Like it can help to have visuals with younger kids. I mean, I think kids under the age of 10 even can use visuals to help them kind of give language to what they're trying to sort through in their mind, emotion wise. And so I think that's Katie Lamping.
Okay. Yep.
She shared something similar to that. I mean, we made our own at Outdoor Kids OT that I haven't in the community for people, but she shared something similar to that at a nature-based retreat where she talked a little bit about like behavior and managing behavior in nature-based sessions. And so it was something that I just thought would be really useful to have as like just a laminated with the dry erase marker, just so that the kid can circle how they feel or draw, or you can draw for them. So it's another strategy like for the kind of problem solving piece of the behavior puzzle. Okay. I think we need to wrap up, but I'm so glad you came to talk about this. I think this is something that so many people have questions about, especially in nature-based work, because it's just not this controlled setting, right? Like you really have to be, you have to have skills as a therapist to be able to help children self-regulate and to help them manage their behaviors. And you have to have the skills to be able to manage the behaviors of many children if you're running groups. So all of this is so helpful to talk through and think through and I think the thing that we can all do too is to process this in community. So if you listen to this episode and you have a tricky situation in your work, like share it inside of the free discussion area in the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community. I know, Jillian, you frequently reply to things there. You're very active there, and share it and get people's feedback, because I think a lot of us work, especially running our own businesses, nature-based practice, kind of a small community. It's different. And so I want the community to be a place, the free community. This is not a pitch to get money, people. Okay. Like I want the free community to be a space where people can do the communication about like, hey, I have this tricky situation came up and this is what I did. And does anybody have ideas for what I could have done differently? I was thinking maybe this, I want those conversations to be happening in that community. So if you're listening and you have something, know that the community is there to support you and help you think through that in the context of other therapists being able to support you and weigh in on it. So Jillian, share with everyone like where they can find you, like to follow you on Instagram or Facebook or where do you hang out?
Yeah, I am pretty lucky. I snagged WildFree Kids OT on Facebook and Instagram. And that's also my website. I am not very active on Instagram. I feel like an old lady because I try. I remember teaching my dad how to type on a computer when I was a teenager. And I will do things and it like disappears. And then I'll text my best friend, Dawn, where did it go? Is it sticking? Right.
Any platform, it does take time to learn any platform, really. I mean, it took me about a year to learn how to use Instagram well. And I went to like a marketing conference and everything and like attended stuff on Instagram. But it's different. It's different from my business. I'm also running two businesses, one of them being primarily online, right? So I think taking your time with learning a new platform, and you're not an old lady. It's just the world. There's so many platforms.
Oh my gosh. And I've really taken into like, it's not my zone of genius. If it's not natural to me, I'm not going to spend my time doing it. Right. So that it's just, I like to see things, but it's not always natural to me. But
we should also say before we log off here, like your practice, and we didn't talk much about this, but your practice is primarily Medicaid based.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting little business caveat, business lesson here at the end of this podcast about behavior in children, that not all nature-based practices are going to need to market in the same way, because your primary market is doctors sending children your way, right? Yeah. So it wouldn't make sense or be smart for you in your business. It would actually, I would say, be a waste of time, honestly, for you to be spending a lot of time on Instagram or Facebook or all these places, because like, why? Like, you really should be in your local community talking to the doctors and making sure the doctors know that your business is out there. Yeah. And that's enough. And you'll get a steady flow of clients, right? Because that's a different referral system than direct to consumer marketing, which people who run cash pay practices have to do. So you're fine. You're doing just the right thing, Jillian. Because you've been in the business Hive for the last year. So you are like an expert business owner now.
Thanks.
Right.
That's the piece of it is Courtney in Anchorage, she's like, hey, I don't know, what should I do? And I had told her, I said, because of my own child, and I was a teacher and a special educator and an OT, I was in the groups for parents on Facebook and just like scrolling, and I'm not spending hours and hours and hours.
Right.
But if a situation spoke to me, I would just say, hey, have you thought of this? Or have you tried this? Or is this something you would consider? Because again, just to bring another viewpoint to things, to get people to think of a different way. And so I've been in there and just trying to like not promote myself, but promote, hey, there's another way to do things. There's another way we can try things. So
and then people naturally find you a helpful person, and then they check out your website and So that's like, I mean, I think that's good. I think that's a good way to kind of build community knowledge of your business, and you're not selling, you're just being helpful, right? It's like, it's like a way that you're serving your community essentially. So, okay. WildFree Kids OT. Don't really expect that she's going to reply if you message her on Instagram.
No, I probably won't. I'm sure I missed some of yours that you sent me actually.
I mean, I don't even know. I've been not on Instagram as much lately. I've had this total shift in my thinking about, I've spent many years building a business, right? And now there's like a lot there for people to like, I'm not really on social media as much as I was in the past, just because I want to be more present in my programs, right? Like I want to be more present for the people that are in my programs. And so it's kind of cool. I don't regret it. I think it's the way the business kind of had to unfold, but I do really love that now I can focus on serving the people in my programs versus having to kind of cast the net really wide to just kind of grow a following or an audience. I hate those words so much, but I don't know any other way to describe them. Like to kind of expand my network, I guess would be a better way to say. So I'm not so much on expansion now. I'm more about like serving the people that are in my program. So it's kind of, it's a good place to be, I think. And also I have all these dreams that I want to do in the program. It's like, I got to revamp everything now because, oh my gosh, I have all these ideas. Like, well, yeah. Okay. Like, small steps. That's the key. Thank you, Jillian, for being here. I'm so grateful to you for making time. I know you're so busy. I say this to almost every guest because every time I'm like, I am so thankful for the people that come here to share their wisdom. So I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Okay. I forgot one question that I wanted to ask Jillian. So we're back just for a minute. So I wanted to ask you about therapeutic holds, because I had a situation with a child, this was a couple of years ago, where he was picking up trash in the park and putting it in his mouth. I had to lay like a firm line of like, we can't, it was just unsafe. I don't remember what it was he picked up, but it was not something that I felt like was okay to put in his mouth. And in California, public parks, you never know what's out there. Could be a marijuana joint, could be a hypodermic needle, who knows? Like, so I laid the line, like we were heading to the pickup. And so it was right at the end of the session. He'd had a really great day. And this was a kid who had some challenging behaviors during sessions, but I just really loved him and had a good relationship with him. He got so upset that I had set that boundary of, I'm sorry, you can't put that in your mouth. You know, like, I'm sorry, we have to, I can't remember. I said it the correct way, like keep it in your hand, or I didn't mind if he held it, maybe whatever it was. And he got so upset that, and was like running off. And I had to like, we're taking all the kids up to meet the parents and he's trying to get away. And so I had to like physically hold him at the location because there were like 6 kids with me and 2 other staff and 5 parents there. And I did not want him to, and of course, mom was late this day. So if mom had, I think this, now that I'm talking through the situation, which is what helps us when we process these stories, right? I remember being so disappointed that his mom was not there, because I honestly think if the mom had been there and I could have done like a smooth transition over when he was just starting to get escalated, but he saw all the other parents there, mom wasn't there. I was trying, and he just escalated quickly. And so I like sat with and I'm not trained in like therapeutic holds, so I don't know, but I'm assuming this is similar to what people would be trained in, right? So I sat at the top of the trailhead, kind of by where my volunteer was kind of helping kids get to their parents, while he is throwing a bloody murder fit, screaming. I don't even remember what he's screaming. I think he was biting me. Like he was really, really upset. But I sat like cross-legged with him in my lap. He was probably about 5 years old. And I kind of circled him with my arms. So I'm holding him with me. And I was telling him, I have to keep you safe. I'm holding you to keep you safe. Like it's not safe to run away. It's not safe. I have to keep you safe, like, so I'm trying to stay very calm and tell him like, I'm using my body to keep you safe, whatever, but in retrospect, I'm like, what could I have done differently? Like, I don't know if I could have done anything differently, but it was just such a hard situation. And like, I'm embarrassed for myself that the other parents had to see. I'm embarrassed for the mom who came late and all the other parents are leaving. And then she shows up and her kid's like throwing a fit and the therapist is kind of holding him. And I don't know if that's what I should have done or like what if I know you weren't there. So it's kind of like hard to say, but like therapeutic holds, I guess. When are they appropriate? And is there a proper way to do them that we should all be trained in somehow? Like, I don't know.
Oh, I have stories about this for days. We do the best we can in the moment with what we have, and your object was to keep him safe. And probably the hold you probably did was appropriate. I would say, like sitting cross-legged and holding him, and he probably needed some pressure. I wonder if, I don't know, if you could have said, hey, do you want to play? What else do you need right now? Do you need a hug? He was probably so escalated that there's no reasoning.
Yeah.
People get to that point where they're limbic.
I think I did try rocking a little bit too. Like I was trying kind of different things in the moment, but man, nothing was. He wasn't having it.
Was he trying to bite you and headbutt you when you were holding him? If you recall,
I don't really remember. I remember. I think he bit my arm, maybe, or like tried to bite the top, like my bicep, like kind of right by where his head was. Like he was just kind of trying to. And I didn't react when he bit. I mean, I was like, it's not safe for me to let go. I think I kept saying, I'll let go when your body's safe, or something like that. Like I need to hold you because you're not safe. Like I'm worried you're going to hurt yourself. I don't know what I was saying. I probably said the same thing over and over. It was so long ago too, but I just remember feeling like, it's just, you hate seeing a kid that upset, it just was hard.
Yeah. And there's so many trainings. There's so many different types of de-escalation strategies where you did everything up to that point. And so when I had said before, like antecedent, like what happened before, you have to meet the type of de-escalation with what the behavior is displaying. So when the child started getting physical, that's when you needed to help him be physically safe. And so that's when a hold would be appropriate. Oftentimes I've seen other professionals try to do restraints on kids who had no training, and it's wrong, totally wrong. It can have more effects and be more detrimental. And those kids that you suspect some trauma, you never want to restrain them in a way or hold them in a way that they are prone, so face down on the floor and you on top of them and they can't see what's going on. Can you imagine?
Oh gosh, that sounds awful to me. Like
I know.
Yeah.
I witnessed some of that, and it wasn't warranted at all. And I'm not talking about like in the treatment centers. The adults in those treatment centers, they were trained. If you weren't trained and didn't have practice, you were not allowed legally, safely to perform any of these holds. And so you had to go through the training. And so when I see other people do these things that don't have the training or the background or knowledge in it, it does sometimes more harm. And so you sitting and holding him in your lap was, I think, ideal for the situation, because you understood something that you couldn't, like, sit on this kid. I mean, and I've also been in trainings where the trainer tells us, do what you have to. And we're like, wait, what do you mean? Be more specific.
Yeah.
And like if somebody's physically harming you, you have the right to protect your body. If this training is not working, you have your right to do whatever you need to. Like, do whatever you need to. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's kind of, that's hard, because
it is hard, because if there were ever an issue, at one place there was an accusation of some, like an heirloom item that was stolen off of a child during a restraint. And it was this whole big hoopla and thing about this. And because if you're wearing something like glasses could get broken, headphones can get broken.
Yeah.
Like clothing's been ripped before, and you have to be careful. But that's why you have to have training, especially in places like that. But when you're out in the middle of the woods and you got to do what you have to, use your clinical judgment and don't ever put yourself in a position that would make it worse. Like that prone, for example, if you suspect any sort of abuse in that child's past, any physical touch might be detrimental, but safety is key. And so I think you did good. And if people are interested in more, there are so many different types of trainings like that, that there's more than that restraint. There's so many things before that you have to learn about and manage to get up to that, because that's kind of a last step. But to go through those steps and figure out, like, you put those limits and you set those boundaries.
I mean, he and I had a good relationship. We even once mom did show up, I stayed like a half hour after the session, and we like took a walk with him, his mom and his sister, and like he calmed down, and we had a great relationship. I mean, I do think we had a very good therapeutic rapport. He was just in this like total, the thing that was hard was that the other parents don't know that. You know, the other parents don't know that he and I have a good, like it to me, it was almost like my fear of their perception was almost worse than what actually me managing his behavior, because other people were watching and not knowing that he and I have a good relationship. And so it was just an interesting, are there trainings that you would recommend? If there's a lot out there, are there certain ones that you would recommend, or are there ones that you think that people should really have? Because this is a legit question, because we've talked about this in my groups or in my staff about, you know, should we all have, like, if we're going to work outdoors with children and specifically in groups, should we all have training in therapeutic holds to kind of know? I mean, I don't think any of my therapists would ever put a kid face down on the ground. That's horrible. But like, are there certain trainings that maybe would be helpful to us and just knowing how to minimize the use of any kind of physical control of a child?
Yeah, there is Therapeutic Crisis Institute is one of them. It's TCI. There's Crisis Prevention Institute, CPI. There is Life-Based Crisis Intervention, which is and that's part of it, is you have to pull, you know, what works best for you. LSCI is a little bit more, it's longer. It takes a little bit more time. The thing about a lot of these is you'll get a lot of practice, because behavior is repetition. We're going to see it. So you have a lot of opportunity to practice. And then that one won't matter. I was thinking the one when I was in Minnesota, it's called EASE. And that was another one, but that was like for the staff who was in
it's not one that people would be able to take. So I'm more concerned with sharing resources with people that they'd be able to take. They could look into those different websites to kind of see if there's something that they want their staff to be trained in. So
I would look into those because they exist. And then the Australian Childhood Foundation is phenomenal. We had talked about that before. It really deals with a lot of trauma, and they have a lot of really great resources on that website. So the Australian Childhood Foundation has some really great resources and trainings and webinars, and I think some of them are on demand. So I would look into that too. I have not.
You use an assessment, don't you, from there, from that website? Tell people about that assessment, and then we'll wrap up.
I use the Trauma Expression and Connection Assessment. And that is an assessment that looks at those behaviors and it's interesting when I give it to people, I have to remind them, just because this is trauma doesn't mean your child's traumatized, and that way we're looking at how do they respond to stressors. And it really breaks down those behaviors and gives us a little bit more details about that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And then the back of that resource is basically a handout you can like magically give to people and say, hey, look at all these really great, amazing things that we can do in that column of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, whatever the child really develop or shows a propensity for. And it gives all these different activities to do to help strengthen relationships and build resiliency, and with a strong with a caregiver who is regulated, who's obviously in a safe environment, and maybe, reach out to somebody, an OT or another professional, if you have questions about what you need to be doing or how to do them. I have handed this to parents, and it's a really eye opener, because maybe they don't have the training that, like I was trying to say before, like when you have a kid who's trying to control the environment, and I can pick up on that because I've been there and I've seen that. You can help them by all these tiny little things. And so this assessment really gives you some insight into, hey, this behavior is actually showing this is anxiety, or maybe this is depression, or maybe this is they're trying to control it, or maybe this is so it gives you a lot of it. I know.
Yeah. What is fawn? I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I know. It's a fawn is you kind of acquiesce to their requests, and you just say, I don't care, do whatever you want, take my phone, I'll eat whatever you want me to. Just I want the stimuli to stop, and they just acquiesce to whatever the request of the adult is. Yep.
Yeah.
Because I know most of us have heard fight, flight, or freeze. Yeah. But that fawn is kind of a new one that people go, what is that one? And usually,
that's cool.
When you talk about those things, they're like, oh, my kid's not that. My kid's a fighter. And you're like, cool, let's take this and see. Yeah. Let's really see. Because some of these behaviors that they think are this are actually in a different category.
Interesting.
They look at the biological
That's
pieces.
So good. I'm so glad we hit record again and recorded this last little question. Yeah. I'm laughing because I did this on the last podcast episode too. So I'm thinking my podcast editors are going to be like, Laura, is this like a PS now on every episode we're going to do? But no. Okay, we will wrap it up. This will be a long episode, but I think really helpful for people. Thank you, Jillian.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us today for Therapy in the Great Outdoors. If you want even more information about nature-based therapy practice with children, you can go to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. There are loads of free resources there to support you in your nature-based therapy work with kids, including a free ebook that I wrote on starting a nature-based practice and links to join our free Therapy in the Great Outdoors community. You'll also find the waitlist for the Contigo Approach online course. That is my nature-based therapy approach that I developed, as well as the Business Hive, which is my year-long group coaching program for nature-based business owners. The waitlists are at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com for those two things as well. This week, I hope you get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy the business and practice of therapy in the great outdoors. See you next time.